Hi everyone. So as I said, I'm going to be making little videos or mini videos this week. And so this is the second of the mini videos for week 8. So in the first video, I gave you a quick introduction to what control is and the sources of control and the types of control, and we went through the transformation process using control. Now what I want to discuss is the criteria for effective control. And so there's 5 key criteria. The first is integration, then flexibility, then accuracy, timeliness, and simplicity. So with integration, even the best designed plans can go wrong. It doesn't matter how well we plan it, something may go wrong. So if we supplement the planning process with control, then we can review any deviations or any plans or goals can be reviewed. And so it gives us an opportunity to ensure that we're setting the required standards of performance, we're measuring that performance, we're comparing that performance, and we're also taking corrective action. Flexibility. So what do we mean by that? It depends on the ability of the organization or the groups or the individuals to adapt to their changing environment. So we know the environments don't stay the same. We know from having discussed the business environment in the first 2 weeks of our module that things change, and they can change quite drastically. And so how do people then proactively deal with these changes, and what do they do? Then accuracy. So objective and accurate information is always vital in the process, especially in a control process. And so if there's any inaccurate information, it compounds a problem, it makes the problem bigger or worse, and so we need to be quite accurate in terms of our reporting and in terms of our control processes. Timeliness. We understand that timeliness is around taking the information and providing it regularly, so that if there is an issue, we can then adapt to that issue and we can fix that issue. And it also gives us various scenarios that we can deal with if there's problem solving that needs to happen. And then simplicity is around ensuring that we don't overlook at the problem or oversee the problem, and that we keep it simple and we get to the heart of the problem. Also, in terms of the complex control system that happens, we don't want it to be too complex that we create more problems. So we keep it quite simple, the control system, because then we can deal adequately with any changes or issues that arise. So what happens then if we've got all 5 of those effective control measures in place? What do we do in terms of the actual control process? And so the control process is a series of 4 steps. The first one is to establish standards of performance. The second is to measure actual performance. Then we want to compare actual versus set standards. And then we need to take corrective action. So if we want to establish standards of performance, we want to make sure that everything is realistic, achievable, and measurable. And if you remember, our SMART goals take realistic, measurable, and attainable or achievable into consideration. And then obviously all standards should be linked to set objectives and goals. So we can have quantity standards, which is basically expressed in a numerical value. So making 75 cups of coffee in 2 hours is a measurable standard or quantity standard. A cost standard, those are also expressed in a numerical value in terms of currency. So how much is a cup of coffee? The cost of 1 cup of coffee is 15 Rand. And then do we add on 2 Rand for sugar and 3 Rand for milk, whatever, that is a cost standard. Then time standards. So standards are expressed in a numerical value in terms of time. So how quick does it, or how long does it take to make a cup of coffee to sell to a client? So from the time the person orders it to the time you take the cup, pour in the sugar, pour in the milk, pour in the coffee, put the boiling water in, stir, 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 how long does it take? And then behavior standards. So these are standards which are expressed in terms of what is perceived as acceptable behavior. So how do you greet a customer when they come into maybe your food store or a takeaway store? If we think about it, we all go into food places or service places, or so if we'll go to Checkers or ShopRite, or we'll go to the coffee shop, or we'll go and get some kind of product, how do they greet us? How do they handle us as customers? That would be a behavior standard. So then, if we establish the standard of performance, so is it a quantity standard, a cost standard, a time standard, or behavior standard, then how do we actually measure that performance on that standard? So measuring performance can be quite difficult because, again, we need to determine what is measured and how we measure it. And so the company depends on correct performances and correct performance measures. Because if we don't have those correct performance measures, we can't have accurate data. So then we need to consider, okay, if we put those into place, would we say that one of the standards for measurement would be the number of cups of coffee we serve? Or would it be the number of compliments we get? Or what would be accurate? Then we need to compare the actual versus the set standards. So what actually happens versus what we hope to achieve or what our goal is. And again, we have to see whether we are on target with either our production or our service or whatever it might be. But when the actual performance does not meet the set standard, then it's known as a performance gap or deviation. And then what happens then if there is a gap, and we don't meet the standard, then we need to take corrective action or rectify deviations. And it should be taken by management to ensure that the performance improves and that deviations do not happen again in the future. Again, we need accurate data for this, and so we need to ensure that there is a reporting control that is solid. Some people will advocate using a 5-step control process. And so the first, if we look at what that means, it means that even if we've got those 5 steps, checking the standard, defining the system, identifying the characteristics, those kinds of things, what else can we do? What I need you to look at in your textbook is called the principle of selectivity, and it can be found on page 240 of your textbook. Have a look at that, and then we will probably discuss it in our discussion forum this week. So what requirements do we have for controls to work? There's 8 criteria for controls to work. They must be tailored to plans and positions. They must be tailored to the individual manager and his personality. So it's not one set control for everybody. Because we're different and because of the diversity that exists in organizations, it must be tailored. Control should also highlight exceptions at critical points. So what is the norm and what is the exception? Controls must be objective. Controls must be flexible. Controls should fit the organizational climate. So when we implement it, we must ensure that they reflect the environment. So if you say, I want you to make 75 cups of coffee in 2 hours, the environment must deem that there are 75 customers asking for those cups of coffee. And the controls must be worth their cost, and the controls should lead to corrective action. So what are the benefits of controls? We can see that there's 3 areas for using control techniques. And so it's around reflecting the changing environment and seeing what's happening in the environment, implementing standards, also looking at employee performance and performance appraisals. And also then you can protect the organization as a manager and also preempt any problems. So if there's a control in place and something happens, it shouldn't actually happen because the control is in place. Then we need to also talk around the different types of control techniques that are available. We've got financial controls, quality controls, and strategy controls. Financial controls, it deals with cash flow, cash management, investment returns, anything where it has to do with the finances of the business. So there must be a budget in place, there must be a financial analysis that gets done. we know that there's 3 types of budgets. So we've got financial budgets, we've got operational budgets, and we've got non-financial budgets. And then we need to look at the financial analysis, which involves financial calculations. So they'll calculate things like your profit, your net profit, break-even analysis, those kinds of things, the DuPont ratio analysis, and the return on equity. Then we have quality controls. So we've got quality circles and we've got benchmarking. And we've got the idea that the management approach must emphasize the management of quality, and that's known as total quality management. And then we have strategy controls. And strategy controls will talk around continuous improvement. We'll talk around Six Sigma, which is a management philosophy, which was developed by Motorola. I don't know if you remember having Motorola phones. So Motorola, the company, said we set extremely high objectives, we collect the data, and we analyze the results to a fine degree as a way to reduce defects in products and services. And it uses a 5-step approach to problem solving. So we define the errors, we measure, we analyze, we improve, and we control. And then you can always go and have a look online for more on Six Sigma. The other thing that we need to look at is continuous improvement, and that's a philosophy that fits well in with all the other approaches because it seeks to continually improve productivity by small incremental changes. So as the changes happen, it continuously improves it. Okay, so I'm going to talk around the balanced scorecard in the next video because it's quite a bit, and so I will see you in the next mini video. Bye!